Hello, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy, and tonight's topics, with full awareness of the fact that I'm competing with the vice presidential debates. Our topics for tonight are the Nasrallah assassination implications, stopping genocide, and of course, the developing wider war. So that's what's going on here. I think it might be a bit more important than the vice presidential debate, but maybe I'm just, maybe I'm just wrong about that. But anyway, we'll see. So we already have one comment from D. Pierce, who says, "Hello, everyone. Hi, D. I see you're not watching the vice presidential debate, but you're here with me, so thank you very much." Anyway, let's get right to it. We have a lot to cover tonight. It's going to be, I think, a very long show, but I hope a very good one. The first piece we're going to go over tonight is from the UN's review. It's by Pepe Escobar, and it's called Nasrallah as Martyr slash Legend. The lands of Islam get ready to channel their rage. Interesting title, I think. Here's a picture of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah. And Pepe says, a symbol was shattered, a legend is born. The resistance, more than ever, won't back down. That was framed not by a Shiite, but by a Lebanese Christian leader, encapsulating how a true political Islam icon is capable of transcending all artificial borders. This decade that I defined as the raging 20s started with a murder. The All-American targeted assassination of Quds Force leader General Soleimani and Hashid al-Shabi commander Abu Mohandes just outside of Baghdad airport. General Soleimani, more than a symbol, was the conceptualizer of the axis of resistance. For all its setbacks, especially in the past few weeks, the axis of resistance is much stronger now than in January of 2000. Soleimani, the martyr, the legend, left an unparalleled legacy that will never cease to inspire all the West Asian nodes of the resistance. Same will happen to Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah. More than a symbol, he was the face of the axis of resistance, extraordinarily popular and respected all across the Arab street and the lands of Islam. For all its setbacks, especially in the past few weeks, the axis of resistance will be much stronger in the next few years than in September of 2024. I couldn't agree more with that, because BRICS is coming. BRICS is coming. Going on, Nasrallah the Martyr, the legend, leaves a legacy comparable to Soleimani's, to whom, incidentally, he was always in awe in military matters and always learning. As a politician, though, as well as a fatherly spiritual source of wisdom, Nasrallah was peerless. Now let's descend from the stars to the gutter. An unredeemable serial war criminal and psychopathic genocidal, violating scores of UN resolutions, popped up at the UN General Assembly in New York and then ordered from inside the building yet another war crime, wiping out an entire block in southern Beirut with dozens of American bunker buster bombs, including the BLU-109 with a JDAM precision guidance system, leaving countless civilians still unaccounted for under the rubble, including Sayed but Nasrallah. I don't know if that's right. I had heard that the body of Nasrallah had been found. As the war criminal addressed the UN General Assembly, over half of the delegates staged a mass walkout. The hall was de facto nearly empty of real Global South diplomats. The remaining audience was presented with yet another trademark display of IQ impaired, quote, maps, unquote, featuring the, quote, blessed, unquote, Saudi Arabia, Sudan, Egypt, Jordan, UAE, and the, quote, cursed, unquote, Iraq, Iran, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen. A rabid, lowly interloper from Polish extraction, a complete fake, passing judgment on ancient civilizations, does not even qualify as gutter-level trash. I think Pepe is talking about Prime Minister Netanyahu. Just a guess. History is replete of instances of entities which cannot be really qualified as proper nation states. They are more like severe bacteriological infections. The only thing they specialize in is kill, 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 preferably unarmed civilians as a terrorist tactic. Terribly dangerous, of course. History also tells us the only way they must be dealt with. No more velvet gloves. Israel killed Sayed Nasrallah for two main reasons. One, because he explicitly reaffirmed Hezbollah would never abandon Gaza for any, quote, deal, unquote, allowing the genocide and total ethnic cleansing to go on, because the Talmudic psychopathological fanatics want to invade and reoccupy Lebanon. Israel did manage to find breaches in Lebanon's and Iran's security. In the case of Beirut, the whole city is infested with infiltrators. Fifth columnists of all stripes move back and forth doing anything they want. Iran is a much more serious proposition, even as the IRGC's commander, Brigadier General Abbas Neil Faroushan, was also killed alongside Nasrallah in Beirut. The IRGC itself in Tehran may have been compromised. As a serious internal security rethink now becomes imperative from Tehran to Beirut, Hezbollah's carefully constructed structure won't collapse because of Nasrallah's assassination. No matter the tsunami of tawdry psyops by the usual suspects, Hezbollah is independent of personalities. The structure is a maze, okay, a rhizome, and other notes. Duly trained, as well as a new leadership, will spring up, as with the Viet Cong during the, quote, American War, unquote. Of course, it's always about an American war because the foundation of the empire of chaos is forever wars, says Pepe. Back in 1982, Israel's war on Lebanon was so brutal that even Ronald Reagan, who once threatened to pave Vietnam and paint it over with parking strikes, was stunned. He said to Prime Minister Begin, who came to prominence as an Irgun terrorist, he said, uh, um, 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 uh, um, uh, uh, um, 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 oh, well, Menachem, this is a Holocaust, unquote. And yet a lowly grifter called Joe Biden, then a senator bought and paid for by the Zionist lobby, called Begin on the phone to reassure him that, quote, if all the civilians get killed, unquote, that's no big deal. Predictably, the then senator, now lame duck zombie in the White House, fully approved Nasrallah's assassination. The ball is now moving to public opinion across all the lands of Islam. Nearly 2 billion Muslims, to a great extent, will also drive the new face of the axis of resistance. The killing machine, for its part, will continue to kill, mostly civilians, unarmed women, and children. Now, nothing prevents the axis of resistance from stepping up to the next level. There's simply no diplomacy, compromise, ceasefire, quote, two-state solution, unquote, or any other procrastination tactics in the horizon. Just a do or die existential fight against a relentless killing machine exhibiting, to paraphrase and invert Yeats, quote, a gaze blank, okay, and pitiless as the sun, unquote. For all practical purposes, the real, italics mine, says Pepe, raging 20s start now. And the rage of the lands of Islam will be focused not only on the killing machine, but on its suckling she-wolf, the empire of forever wars. What I love about Pepe is that he's so visual, so visual. Right, the suckling she-wolf, the empire of forever wars. What an image. Iran, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Turkey, Pakistan. Scores of global majority actors should be getting ready for a historical first. Coordinate diplomacy, geoeconomics, and military potential to the max to finally confront the bacteriological infection head on. An auspicious scenario now becomes quite plausible. BRICS, assuming the role of chief diplomatic channel for the lands of Islam. The next logical stage would be to get the UN out of Israeli-American territory and establish an HQ in a nation that really respects international humanitarian law. Well, that's a bold suggestion, removing the UN from the United States and establishing it somewhere else. The politically emerged, somehow I don't think that's going to happen. I think what's more likely to happen is, if you think the UN is hopelessly compromised by being here in the United States, then you're probably going to have to establish, a new UN, probably using BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Going on with Pepe. The political emerging global majority will then establish its own global, really United Nations organization, leaving the racists to wallow and rot inside their own walls. Meanwhile, in the battlefield, velvet gloves should be removed. The time has come for death by 1,000 cuts. Boy, that was really Pepe on the warpath. It is what it is. The assassination of Nasrallah has driven people of goodwill all over the planet furious, absolutely furious, and outraged and angry for the use of assassination in this way. Think about it for a minute. What would we think if there was a sudden attack on the capital of the United States and Joe Biden was assassinated? And with him, the vice president. And with them, the Secretary of Defense. What would we think then? Okay, going on. Let me check. Let me make sure I've shared this on Facebook. I don't think I have. Well, D has probably done it for me. I'm just going to make sure. God bless you, honey.
Thank you.
Okay, so there we are. So, we have Robert here today also. Since I found out the Sacramento City Council is not having a meeting until next Tuesday, I decided to listen to this live stream, but we'll be attending the City Council meeting next week. Robert says, I heard one of the main targets in today's Iranian attack was an Israeli Air Force base, which got hit hard. Yeah, I haven't been able to confirm it, but I've heard that the Israeli Air Force base was the one in the south of Israel that is the base from which the F-35s take off from. And I heard that, first of all, it was hit very hard and put out of commission. But secondly, that 22 F-35s were lost in this particular attack. That last thing I haven't been able to confirm, but there's no doubt that the Israeli Air Force Base was hit hard. Dee says, I shared on Facebook and X. Thank you, Dee. I still can't begin to call it X. Oh, by the way, according to the indicator, we've got 56 people here who are here rather than watching the vice presidential debate. So maybe it wasn't such a bad idea for me to stream tonight. Anyway, I'm going to move on to the second of our pieces here for tonight. I've got a lot of stuff to share with you here tonight. A lot of really good stuff. This is an opinion piece by Juan Cole. Juan Cole is a great blogger, professor at the University of Michigan. He published this in Common Dreams, of course, originally on his own site, which is the Informed Comment site. And the photo is demonstrators hold pictures of Hassan Nasrallah, late leader of the Lebanese group Hezbollah, during a protest vigil, in the southern Lebanese city of Sidon, on September 28th, 2024. Boy, you know how old Sidon is? It is older than Jerusalem. It is older than Jerusalem. The two Phoenician city-states of Sidon and Tyre, they go all the way back. These demonstrations were in Sidon. Anyway, the path to Nasrallah's assassination and what lies ahead. The Israeli government had long been determined to go into Lebanon to wipe out Hezbollah and perhaps to reoccupy the Lebanese south. Yes, Israel had occupied the south of Lebanon from 1982 until 2002. They finally withdrew in 2002 after 20 years. Anyway, here's one coal on the assassination. The Israeli assassination of Hassan Nasrallah has implications for the struggle of Iran and its alliance of resistance against Israel and the United States. But I would like to step back and look at how we reached this juncture. I lived in Lebanon on and off in the 1970s when the Civil War, 1975 to 1989, began. But Lebanon is a country full of minorities with no majority. Christians, Sunni Muslims, and Shiite Muslims are the major groups. But there are some smaller communities of great importance, including the Druze, an offshoot of Twelver Shiism, and the Eastern Orthodox Christians. Religious ethnicity, what the French call, quote, confessionalism, unquote, plays a role in Lebanon similar to that played in American society by racial ethnicity. Interesting. During the Civil War, each community threw up their militias, usually more than one, and these militias often targeted one another as much as their enemies. In the south, East Beirut and the Bekaa Valley, Shiites predominated. They were the poorest of the Lebanese religious communities, often consisting of tobacco sharecroppers and other impoverished agriculturalists in the countryside. In East Beirut, they did day labor. Shiites back in the 1950s and 1960s had not been very involved in Lebanese politics, concentrating on the affairs of their villages. A few great landlords were in parliament, but they had almost feudal relationships to the farmers. In the 1970s, an Iranian cleric named Musa Sadr, S-A-D-R that is for his last name, transplanted to Lebanon, helped organize AMAL, an acronym for Troops of the Lebanese Resistance, but with the literal meaning of, quote, hope, unquote. It was a charity, a political party, and a militia. Amal appealed to the new Shiite middle class, people who had relatives that had emigrated to West Africa or to the oil Gulf and sent back remittances. The incoming wealth allowed them to found banks and other businesses and to fund the activities, of Amal. The idea of a party militia was not new. Among the Maronite Christians, the Phalangist Party had modeled itself on Franco's brown shirts and Mussolini's black shirts. I used to see them doing drills in the street when I lived in Shia, Beirut. Sadr was kidnapped by Muammar Gaddafi when he visited Libya in search of funding for Amal. Maybe Gaddafi felt he hadn't delivered on some promise, but maybe Gaddafi was increasingly deranged. The 1979 Islamic Revolution radicalized some young Lebanese Shiites. Abbas Musawi hived off from from Amal, and formed Islamic Amal. They were in touch with the Iraqi Dawa Party and the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. In 1982, Israel invaded Lebanon in a quest to extirpate the Palestine Liberation Organization, subjecting Beirut to indiscriminate shelling. Among those who were appalled was Osama bin Laden, who later said that he began aspiring to bring down U.S. skyscrapers on seeing what the Israelis did to those in Beirut. The Islamic Amal saw the Israeli invasion and occupation as a U.S. project. They blew up the U.S. Embassy in Beirut in 1983, and then targeted the Marines who were on a peacekeeping mission with a truck bomb, killing 241 U.S. service personnel. In 1984, Musawi and others formed Hezbollah. The organization but then mobilized the poorer and more radical Shiites in East Beirut, in Tyre, and the Bekaa Valley for guerrilla warfare to get the Israelis back out of their country. Israel occupied 10% of Lebanon from 1982 to 2000, so it wasn't 2002, it was 2000, but suffered increasing casualties from Hezbollah sniping and suicide bombing, a technique they picked up from the Tamil Tigers in Sri Lanka. In 1989, the Saudis sent Saad Hariri, a Lebanese Sunni who had made billions as a contractor in the kingdom, to try to end the war. That year at Ta'if, most of the armed factions pledged to lay down their arms, which they did, and Hariri became prime minister. He began the process of rebuilding Beirut, a process that made his companies rich. The only group that did not disarm was Hezbollah, on the grounds that it was fighting the occupation of the Lebanese South by the Israelis. By 2000, Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak withdrew from Lebanon. Hezbollah at that point should have followed the rest of the militias into the Taif Accords, laying down their arms and becoming solely a parliamentary political party. Hassan Nasrallah, by then the leader, however, refused that path. He began pressing claims on the Sheba farm villages of Syria, which Israel had illegally occupied. These lands had been owned by Shiite Lebanese, and Syria said they could have them back if the Israelis would leave. Nasrallah had the Israeli settlements there shelled indiscriminately, which is a war crime, since it's put civilians in harm's way. Moreover, Hezbollah planned terrorist operations even in Europe. Had it stuck with the purely military struggle with the Israeli army, it might have avoided being listed as a terrorist group, which cost it all legitimacy in the industrialized democracies. In 2004-2005, a crisis unfolded in Lebanon over Syrian political meddling in the country. Hariri and most of the Maronite Christians demonstrated against the Syrians, and Hariri was killed in a truck bomb in February 2005, probably by Hezbollah or Hezbollah field officers working for Syrian intelligence. The March 14th coalition managed to convince the Syrians to pull their troops out of the country. Nasrallah's March 8th coalition, joined by Michel Aoun's Christians, held huge counter-demonstrations in favor of Syria, but lost. In 2006, Hezbollah attacks on Israel for the sake of getting the Sheba farms back were taken as a pretext by Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, who launched a wide-ranging war on Lebanon. Israel, of course, won, but it did suffer setbacks owing to Hezbollah guerrilla tactics. In the aftermath, Nasrallah apologized for dragging the country into a destructive war that set back its economy. I have to add here that may have been the case, but the resistance put up by Nasrallah in 2006 and Hezbollah in 2006 actually made him a hero, in Lebanon, and was important in establishing Hezbollah politically in the country in a favorable way. Going further, in 2008, Hezbollah fought the Lebanese Sunnis over a number of issues, including control of telecommunications at Beirut Airport. Nasrallah had earlier pledged never to use his arms on fellow Lebanese, but he reneged on that promise. From 2013 on, Nasrallah sent Hezbollah fighters into Syria to help keep Bashar Assad in power, allying with the Iranian Revolutionary Guards and Russia against the Syrian Muslim Brotherhood and more radical Al-Qaeda adjacent groups. Here I think that Cole should be mentioning the name of ISIS, because they were very important in Syria at this time. Hezbollah's name became mud among many Sunni Arabs as it lost the popularity gained in 2006. Hezbollah as a party did well in Lebanese elections and played an increasing role in the national cabinet. We generally don't hear about that here in the United States, of course. Hezbollah built up a rocket arsenal with Iran's help. It was only useful for defensive purposes as a deterrent against Israeli aggression. Few rockets have guidance systems and so can't be used in a targeted way. The U.S. Iron Dome anti-missile batteries, I thought it was Israel's Iron Dome, but okay, made these rockets relatively useless and so removed their deterrent effect. The outbreak of war, well, he certainly skips a lot of space there, because basically we're going from like 2006, 2007, 2008, all the way up to October 7, 2023. The outbreak of war after the Hamas attack on Israel put Nasrallah in a difficult situation. His only source of popularity, and also legitimacy, was resistance to Israel. Iran pressured him to keep a low profile and avoid provoking another war. Although 80% of the attacks at the Israeli-Lebanese border were launched by Israel, Hezbollah was baited into a tit-for-tat. Thousands of Israelis were displaced from the north, just as tens of thousands of Shiites were displaced from the Lebanese south by Israeli airstrikes. The fascist Israeli government of Benjamin Netanyahu, Itamar Ben-Gvir, Bezalel Smotrich, receiving unstinting backing from the Biden administration, has adopted a policy of I guess it's Milosevism. Slobodan Milosevic aimed for a greater Syria after the breakup of communist Yugoslavia coveting much of Bosnia-Herzegovina and Kosovo, and being willing to deploy the tools of ethnic cleansing and genocide. The Jewish power government of contemporary Israel aims at a greater Israel, ethnically cleansing Gaza and the West Bank and southern Lebanon in preparation for Israeli hegemony. I think here he should have added in West Asia. Despite Biden's feeble and risible cautions against a wider war, the Milosevicist Israeli government had long been determined to go into Lebanon and to wipe out Hezbollah, and perhaps to reoccupy the Lebanese south. Unbeknownst to Nasrallah, his high council had been penetrated by agents working for Israel so that the latter could booby-trap their pages and could also determine Nasrallah's whereabouts in real time. So this is Juan Cole's explanation of how Israel was able to get in and perform the assassination, of Nasrallah. Nasrallah left behind, says Cole, left behind Lebanon in shambles. Its government so corrupt that it let the port explode and allowed the chairman of the National Bank to embezzle all the country's money. Poverty skyrocketed to 40% of the population in what had been a prosperous country. It's amazing to think it had become a prosperous country from 1982 on, since the Israelis were occupying part of the South. But I do know that there was the rebuilding of Beirut. Beirut started to become active in tourism and again was called the Paris of the Western Asia, or words to that effect, or the Paris of the Middle East. But anyway, going on. In the end, Nasrallah led a small organization of some 45,000 fighters that was attempting to punch above its weight. I guess I have to disagree with that, because I believe the figures of the size of Hezbollah right now are much closer to 100,000 than they are to 45,000 by most accounts. But Juan Cole thinks it's at 45,000. Cole does know a lot about the Middle East. He's really a pretty good analyst and is to be respected, but I still think he's wrong about the 45,000 fighters. I trust Scott Ritter and Colonel McGregor more than he when they estimate the size of Hezbollah at 90 to 100,000. Going on, the Syrian intervention overstretched its resources and made it vulnerable in the Lebanese south. Its rockets were rendered ineffectual by the Iron Dome. Its cadres grew corrupt and open to Israeli shekels. It transitioned from a light and mobile guerrilla group with no return address to a quasi-governmental body with an HQ that could be struck by bunker-busting bombs. Possibly, Hezbollah will be forced now to go back to its guerrilla roots and a more secure cell structure. The Jewish power and religious Zionism fanatics who dream of reoccupying southern Lebanon and siphoning off the waters of the Litani River will likely discover, if they do so, the potential for guerrilla resistance has not been and cannot be eradicated. That was an interesting article for its different perspectives on many subjects. It is both favorable to Nasrallah and Hezbollah, but also critical at the same time. Very critical of Israel, of course, out and out condemning it as a fascist state. I don't agree with it about the rockets being rendered ineffectual by the Iron Dome. I think the Hezbollah rockets since October 7th have really created a lot of chaos in Israel, which is why the 70,000 people uh, have had to go away from the north and take up residence in other parts of Israel. And that's had a devastating effect on the economy of Israel. And some of the other attacks by Hezbollah since October 7th have also hurt the economy of Israel and have been effective in that way. But just last night, there was a reported attack by Hezbollah on Mossad headquarters, okay, in Tel Aviv. And my initial understanding of this attack, and perhaps uh, this isn't correct and won't be confirmed, but the descriptions from the original attacks were that the Mossad headquarters in Tel Aviv were destroyed. And if that's the case, a very heavy blow was visited, okay, upon Israel for that, because it was Mossad who was responsible for the assassination of all the various people who have been assassinated over the last 6 weeks or so. Hania included, and Nasrallah included, okay, and Abu Shakra also included. So the effectiveness of Mossad over this period of time has been really harmful, okay, to Hezbollah. And if their HQ is now destroyed by Hezbollah weapons, that is certainly an effective and useful revenge. So I disagree with that idea that the rockets were, rendered ineffectual by the Iron Dome. I think they had some effects. They were increasingly effectual as the period from October 7th to the present, okay, has worn on. And certainly during this period of heavy attacks on Israel by the axis of resistance, Hezbollah rockets and missiles and drones have been very, very effective, okay, indeed. So I'm going to look in on you guys now and see what comments you have before I go on to the next piece. Joe Logan says, hello, people have shared. Thank you, Joe. Haven't seen you here in a while. Joe says, so circle jerk politicians here and abroad are all, he says, fiscos. I would say psychos, but he would say fiscos, okay? There are now 73 folks watching here. Thank you all for coming. We have a lot more to come, so please continue to share, like, and subscribe, because we have enough material tonight to choke a horse, and some of it is truly wonderful. So, getting on to the next piece. We have an interview by Rania Khalek. Okay, Rania interviews here a man by the name of Elijah Magnier, okay, or Magnier, sometimes it's said, okay, or pronounced. He is a wonderful war correspondent who's been tracking the war in Lebanon very closely. Rania has interviewed him, okay, on a number of occasions, and usually she turns to him when there's some kind of crisis that's going on, and she did here. And I'm going to pick up this interview at about 1948 in. It has a number of very, very striking moments, and I can't cover them all, but it is a wonderful interview. Let's see, 1948. We can pick it up at 1940. That's enough. Did I screw that up? Probably.
Try to talk about somebody's bravery or lack of it because they're not in a place that Israel's carpet bombing. Anyways, I'm going to leave that there. But what I do want to say is I think a lot of people are oscillating between two feelings on this, Elijah. And one is, for the last year now, before all this started, Hezbollah did seem to have a form of strategic deterrence against Israel. At least everybody felt it. And it gave people in a lot of Lebanon, obviously not in the southern villages, but a feeling of safety. And that's been a bit shattered at this moment, because at this moment, it feels very much like Israel's kind of omnipotent. Like they just know everything. They could get to Hassan Nasrallah. They know and see where everyone is. And it's quite a scary prospect, Even my own family is becoming more uncomfortable, even just communicating over the phone to tell us if they're okay, because they don't know what Israel's watching, because everyone feels like Israel's watching everything, and maybe they are. There's also a feeling, I think, among people that, the Israelis are somehow like made of titanium or something, and we're made of paper. So they can just kill like 100 of us like it's nothing, and we die so easily. And then they have this iron dome that protects them, and they can't be touched. And so to that, I want to ask you, all this time, and you and I have done episodes on this before where you've explained Hezbollah's capabilities. So I guess here's where I want to start with this. Israel has obviously taken out a significant portion of Hezbollah's senior leadership. And obviously some mistakes were made, and I'm sure there's a reckoning about that, and hopefully a reflection on that among the resistance Axis leadership or whoever's taking over at this point. But all that's to say, how degraded are they? Are they what are their capabilities still? Israel took out leaders, very important figures. We cannot deny that there have been massive blows, and Lebanon is in a catastrophic situation right now. And everybody's wondering, where is this capability we heard about Hezbollah's ability to hit back? And what's...
Okay, Rania is obviously feeling fairly depressed. Her headquarters, are in Lebanon mostly, in Beirut. That's where she normally streams from. She left there actually 2 weeks ago when things were starting to get hot. I don't know. I did not pick up from this video whether she was streaming from the United States, where she has capability to stream and lots of friends, and she's often here. And obviously, she speaks with an American accent, so she's spent years and years and years here. Or whether she went back to Syria. I believe she's a native of Syria, and that her family is there, and she might have gone back there. So I don't know where she's streaming from in this particular video, but she's obviously depressed and anxious and feeling helpless, somewhat helpless. And it's in that context that she asks this question, of Elijah.
What's the response going to be if they're even capable of one?
The reaction is normal. People are not expert in warfare, and perhaps they did not live enough wars to understand that we are just at the beginning, only 2 weeks. The war started with a pager, really. And then with a pager, there were one hit after another. That's one. Two, the Israelis have the air superiority and dominance. And I've written several weeks ago that Israel had 13 to 15,000 targets to bombard. And when they finish their bank of objectives, Hezbollah will react. It turned out that I am wrong, because actually Israel has only 3,500 targets, not 13,000, because today they said, we've done it. That's great.
Okay, so I thought that was amazing that he had picked out 13,000 targets But Israel had only 500. I thought that was enormously interesting.
which means that when there is an air dominance, people don't go out and open their warehouses and start firing against Israel, offering to Israel a new and updated bank of objectives. On the contrary, you've done your job, you're finished, you show everything you have. Now you feel the victory. Great. Did Israel occupy Lebanon? Did Israel declare that Hezbollah has been defeated? On the contrary, the Lebanese and the world is watching and saying that Hezbollah has been defeated, while the Israelis are saying 10% of Hezbollah's capability has been destroyed. We're talking about 10%. So
This is it, folks. We need you to send a donation to help elect Kamala Harris and Tim Walz right now, because time is running out.
did Israel declare that Hezbollah has been defeated? On the contrary, the Lebanese and the world is watching and saying that Hezbollah has been defeated, while the Israelis are saying 10% of Hezbollah's capability has been destroyed. We're talking about 10%. So after carpet bombing Lebanon for 2 weeks, all bombarding all these capabilities, all the families of the militants and the militants, they've managed to come out with a total, since the beginning of the war, around 1,700 people who were killed. Is this all what Israel can do in terms of war? I'm not encouraging or undermining the number of killed or the number of targets destroyed. On the contrary, if Israel is right, then the invasion will happen in the next few days, and that will be it. Israel will walk into Lebanon and then it can occupy the area that it wants. But what's happening is, first, the ground forces, the special forces, have not been engaged in any war or any confrontation against Israel from the 7th of October until today. The special forces were not involved in this war. Only the missile forces that are part of the 3 units, 2 south of the Litani River and 1 north of the Litani River. These are the units that were fighting Israel in the last almost 12 months. Secondly, all the warehouses, the excess of warehouses, not all of them have been destroyed, showing that the Israelis in some places had old information, but it doesn't matter. Everything that's under the ground is still intact. And I think in the next 48 hours, we will see if Hezbollah has the capability to regain the initiative after Israel said, I'm done with the objectives, and now I'm going to look for something else, because they feel the victory. And feeling the victory is deadly when the Israelis are not really estimating the strength of the enemy.
Okay, so far, I think Elijah has made quite a number of important points to get people thinking that the capability of Hezbollah is still intact in spite of the assassinations, that the initial capability is still intact, all there, that the resources of Hezbollah have not been engaged by the Israelis yet. Their victory was a victory of shock, and awe, and it was a victory of killing the important people, in the structure. But this is very much still a guerrilla structure, and there were people, therefore, ready to step into the places of the assassinated people, including Nasrallah. In fact, the person who stepped into Nasrallah's shoes at this point happens to be Nasrallah's cousin, who was trained by Nasrallah. It just so happens. But also the idea that we will know in a few days, whether the capability to hurt Israel still exists in Hezbollah. We already know that because the successful attack on the Mossad headquarters in Tel Aviv itself demonstrates that Hezbollah still has plenty of capability. And during the attacks today, which we will go over soon, the attacks today, of course, included a very devastating attack from the Iranians. But at the same time, Hezbollah was also attacking Israel. And as I said, they had the great success of either destroying or at least severely damaging the Mossad headquarters in Tel Aviv. So already we see that there's evidence that the views of Elijah here are quite correct. I will go on with them now.
Hezbollah has received a hit. That is true. Hezbollah has failed in several small tactical battles, but the war has not started yet. We're just the beginning. We still have a year ahead, several months ahead. So people are going to start falling into the Israeli propaganda and what they see, thinking that 150,000 members of Hezbollah, that Hezbollah said, this is how we are. Suppose Hezbollah is not telling the truth and it has only half of that. So that is, we're talking about 75,000 only. So if Israel managed to kill 1,700, or even 2,000, or 3,000, or 5,000, or 10,000, there's still at least tens of thousands waiting to fight. So what the Israelis are not saying...
Just a footnote, I don't think the Israelis have killed more. Now, they've killed totally in Lebanon since they started attacking. Perhaps 1,700 to 2,000 people now. Those 17,000 to 2,000 people were not Hezbollah. Who knows how many Hezbollah members were actually killed? The figure is probably in the hundreds. Okay, so we're talking about hundreds out of possibly 150,000, or if they're lying, okay, as Elijah said, hundreds out of 75,000. It's nothing.
Saying we have won. John Kirby today, the spokesperson of the US government, said Hezbollah today is not like Hezbollah a week ago. And Hezbollah's chain of command has been destroyed. All the leaders have been destroyed. I can tell you all the leaders have been already replaced. The announcement of Sayyid Nasrallah's death took place only when a new Secretary General was elected. The killing of every single commander was announced when immediately another commander took place. For example, the Akil was killed among other Ridwan commanders. 7 of these commanders came out alive. They died from the pressure, but the other 7 were very close to the exit and they did not die because Hezbollah did not hit the same room under the ground, but 100 meters away, and the pressure killed many people. But there are 7 that did not die. And there are around 200 other commanders that are ready to replace those who are going to be killed in the battlefield.
So let me ask you this. This is a criticism that I've been hearing people say, and I'm curious your thoughts, because I think up until now, the resistance groups and Iran have been quite restrained, right, in their response to Israel. And some of the criticism has been that perhaps this was a mistaken way of dealing with Israel. Perhaps too much restraint has made these groups look weak and has emboldened the Israelis. For example, the Iranians have yet to respond to Ismail Haniyeh being murdered by the Israelis in Tehran. Hezbollah has responded to, various assassinations prior to the last couple of weeks, of course, but the responses have not been, have been calibrated to, not provoke a wider scale war. in hopes that, they could continue this sort of tit for tat with Israel. That didn't expand any further, but that didn't work.
So why would Hezbollah want to maintain the tit for tat, okay, and not escalate? Because the axis, okay, of resistance forces have been attempting not to escalate this. They want to keep the pressure, okay, on Israel. They don't want to give up on helping Gaza because they are highly committed to saving Gaza. But at the same time, they don't want to escalate to a wider war that will bring the United States in. So that's why they've never used all their power. It's been estimated that Hezbollah has 150 to 200,000 rockets, drones, cruise missiles, also ballistic missiles in their arsenal. Over the whole period of the war, they have probably only expended, 3,500 missiles since October 7th. And of course, they get more from Iran all the time. So, I don't know whether their arsenal is at all down from the 150 to 200,000. But even if it's all down, even if the 3,500 and there were, no replacements, it would still have nearly the 150 to 200 thousands missiles and drones, and cruise missiles and ballistic missiles. So we're looking at a situation where Hezbollah has deliberately not used its full capability yet. If you ask why this is, again, it's because Hezbollah hasn't wanted to bring the U.S. in. Israel, on the other hand, is escalating continuously to bring the U.S. into the war, to drag us in, whether we want to come or not. Going on.
And now, the Israelis, we've seen them displace 1 million people in Lebanon. We've seen them, taking out entire residential buildings. Today they've been bombing many residential homes in Sud, for example, which is something I didn't think I was going to see.
Also, just to mention, in the assassination of Nasrallah and his compatriots, it is said that they had to destroy an apartment complex inhabited by 1,000 people. They did this with 80 one-ton bombs, 2,000 pounds explosive each. They were bunker buster bombs. What they had to do to get to Nasrallah was to explode the buildings, bring them crashing down, then disperse the rubble through further explosions. Then, with the bunker buster bombs, dig 14 stories down to get to the meeting room where Nasrallah was. Now, of course, all this is a war crime because they have no right to bomb a civilian residence like that, whether Hassan Nasrallah was in it or not. I know they claim the right, but according to international law, this is a war crime because of the way they did it. So, let's go
on. There's displaced people everywhere, like sleeping on sidewalks. It's just a horror show. And so all that's to say, my question for you is, do you think that being restrained by these groups has militarily been the wrong strategy given Israel's responses. And then on top of that, everybody's wondering, is Iran going to get involved? Is Iran going to do anything? Or is it going to continue to be restrained? And then some people are saying if Iran continues to be restrained, I mean, they're next, right? You even have the Israelis saying it, by the way. I don't know if they'll actually carry through, their words, but the Israelis are making threats to the Iranian supreme leader, basically saying you're next.
Why Iran would be involved in this war? To show that Hezbollah is weak. Hezbollah is not weak. Hezbollah received several hits. The strength of Hezbollah has not come out yet. We haven't seen any involvement of the naval unit. They're still intact. The ground forces unit, they're still intact. The long-range missile units, they're still intact. The missile unit that is on the borders with Syria and inside Syria opposite the Golan height, the occupied Golan height, they're still intact. Why would Iran join when Iran can continue supplying Hezbollah with what Hezbollah needs without declaring war on the United States and Israel? Because declaring war on Israel means on the United States because they are together. On the contrary, Iran now is free to move around. It can come to Syria, that is doing, offer to Syria the know-how that has done, offer the material to manufacture weapons and missiles. Well, actually, the Fadi 1 and 2, 3 are Syrian missiles. They frog missiles with advanced GPS on their tail to make sure that they can reach the objective within a certain precision. Why give up on all that just to say, hey, we declare war on Israel and we're part of the war directly? Every single bullet fired by Hezbollah, by Iran, by Yemen, and by Iraq comes from Iran. Iran is involved in this battle since 1982. But being involved directly and declare war and come in, it means the Iran allies have given up and they have no more strength to fight. And as I said earlier, we just started 2 weeks ago. Still have so many months ahead. The war did not finish. On the contrary, it's just beginning. The Israelis tested Hezbollah's capability, and Hezbollah learned what Israel knows and what are the objectives that were uncovered to the Israelis. Good. Other objectives are not. Other warehouses are not. Other leaders are still not known for Hezbollah. There are thousands of leaders that have not been killed. Killing 5, 10, 20, 30, 50 is part of the war. So it's like when I ask a general, if there are 8 major generals in the army, as there are 8 people in the Jihadi Council, and 3 or 5 of these have been killed, how many generals will replace them? He said 2,000. They're all waiting because there aren't spaces for more than these 8 occupying all the key positions. So Hezbollah is an irregular, organized army.
Yeah, no, those are all really good points. I want to thank people who are throwing money in the super chat. And one person in particular, I just want to show the comment. His name's Nader. Says, my family's from areas next to Sur, Tyre. My heart is broken seeing what my people are going through. I visited most summers. Stay strong, my people. Thank you so much, Nader, and I'm with you on that.
Okay, I'm going to move now to another part, just ahead a little, to pick up the discussion. Okay, later, there's another very striking part. What was it? 3554. Pick it up here.
I think it's great news to hear that the Israelis think they can change the names of the villages in the south of Lebanon and they can occupy the south of Lebanon, because their overconfidence means that their fall will be harder. And we're talking about the ground forces that are still intact. I'm sorry to say, to disappoint many people, that we haven't seen yet what the missile forces are capable of. And I think soon they will regret to think that the missile forces units have been depleted or they have no longer the possibility. If you start counting how many missiles are going to fall on Israel on every day, you understand that Hezbollah can fire at least the same amount every single day or go gradually higher if they go higher. So I think this is going to be shown very soon. Secondly, saying that they threaten the Lebanese airport is again great news, because it means that Hezbollah has a right to treat the Ben Gurion airport and other airports in the same way, because the Israeli violate the Lebanese sovereignty by threatening the Lebanese airport, the only airport that is in the country, and they bombed the civilian area in the Dahieh, they bombed civilian area in the south of Lebanon and in the Bekaa Valley. They offered on a silver plate to Hezbollah the possibility to do exactly the same when Hezbollah was trying to avoid all these and was losing, because avoiding all the non-combatant targets, Hezbollah is not the match of the Israeli Air Force. But when all the red lines are lifted, then this is where there is a little relief for Hezbollah, which means the Israelis have invited Hezbollah to treat its civilians in the same way, to treat.
I thought that was a great point, by Elijah. As long as the two sides, had made an agreement to not go after the civilian areas, then the rockets Hezbollah has and can use could not be very effective. And you had a situation where they were always trying to shoot at, military targets. And so people really hardly noticed that in many ways. And the cities of Tel Aviv and Haifa largely escaped. Netanya, largely escaped. But now, with the Israelis going after civilians, it's not something Hezbollah has to worry about any longer, because the good opinion of the people, in the international system, has already been lost by Israel, and it's perfectly understandable that the Lebanese would reciprocate in kind by hitting at the Israeli civilians. And by the way, that's really where Israel is weak, especially when it comes to the West Bank settlers, I think. It's my judgment the West Bank settlers don't have the stomach to stay in Israel if Israel is not safe. But anyway, we will talk about that, a little later with respect to something else here. Let us go on.
The airport in the same way. Well, what about the surface-to-surface missile that can destroy all the oil and gas platforms? We haven't seen any yet. What about the harbor of Haifa and Eilat? We haven't seen any attack on these harbors yet.
Just to point out, today there were attacks on the gas platforms that were close to Haifa. They were successful, and those platforms, were burning. I can't remember whether they were burning from an Iranian missile that was fired at them, or whether they were burning because Hezbollah missiles, were fired at them. But those gas platforms are finally burning.
The moment the Israeli threatened the harbor in Beirut, I think the harbors in Israel will be shut down completely. But maybe people will start laughing at what I'm saying now. But the Israelis said they have exhausted their bank of objectives. If Hezbollah doesn't show its strength very soon, it means Israel has won the war. If Israel see that Hezbollah is incapable of replying, then the natural thing to do is to walk in the army and take as much as they want from the Lebanese territory in the south of Lebanon. But remember, 1982, Hezbollah had very little weapons to fight. And it took them 18 years to teach the Israelis a lesson. Israel, when it's supported by the US and NATO since the beginning. So, with the very little capability, when Israel walked into the Lebanon, it was not considered an enemy by many people in the south of Lebanon at the first beginning. It became an enemy. Now, every single person in the south of Lebanon would love to see Israel losing men on the Lebanese soil to teach them a lesson. If Hezbollah is not capable of doing so, then the south of Lebanon is doomed, which is not something that I think is going to happen. On the contrary, and I think Israel need to reevaluate if they want to go into the south of Lebanon, if they see Hezbollah's capability is still strong enough to inflict pain on Israel. And by seeing that and going to a ground invasion, that will be a wrong military move, which is something that Hezbollah will not dislike because that gives the opportunity for the Ridwan forces, the special forces, to be engaged. Doesn't mean that Hezbollah is waiting for them to come. On the contrary, nobody wants the war to expand. But if they think they can come in, then this is why the Ridwan forces have been trained for when they were considered as the intervention force in the year 2000, and then they were turned into special forces, trained like any other special forces around the world, and much more than that. And these are the ones who are going to meet the Israelis when they can no longer use their air force and they have to meet face to face with the Israelis and the special forces of Hezbollah.
Okay, so I thought that point was a very, very important one. Also, okay, we can think about that certainly. We also have to note, though, that there has been a ground invasion today by the Israelis. I don't think that the ground invasion has yet been met by the special forces, okay, of Lebanon, but I think it shortly will be. I understand the ground invasion was a limited ground invasion. It was characterized, okay, as a limited ground invasion. I think there were about 45,000 troops involved, and if I recall correctly, 534 Merkava tanks involved. So I'm not sure how limited, that is, but it was characterized as a limited ground invasion. So far, the Lebanese have been saying that they haven't seen them yet, or at least in some of the videos I saw today, that was such a remark. Could be by now that the Lebanese and the Israelis have seen each other. But I did want to take one more segment of this. I want to move it forward. Another very striking segment. Here is close enough.
To be asked, I imagine they're being asked internally. But I do want to say, when you're fighting the most powerful military empire in the history of the world, and that's what Israel is, because Israel is an extension of America and it has the full backing of America. And you've covered war for a very long time, Elijah. You saw the aftermath of Sabra and Shatila, which is one of the most horrific acts of violence in the region ever. I think what we're witnessing now is a more depraved kind of imperialism than anything we've ever seen. I mean, I saw someone pointing out that George W. Bush had actually criticized Israel for in the early 2000s when they killed Hamas's leader because they killed 7 civilians in the process, and that was too much collateral damage. Now we have an entire political spectrum in the US that includes the Democratic president and vice president, who's probably going to be the next president, releasing statements calling the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah, which was carried out by killing hundreds of civilians in residential buildings, hundreds, not 7, hundreds, an act of justice that they fully support. That is the kind of American imperialism and empire we are dealing with today. I think it's more depraved than ever before, and it is a huge adversary to be up against. And I mean, Hezbollah, Iran, this resistance axis, they're made up of people who, picked up arms defending their land to the best of their ability. Maybe mistakes are made, but at the same time, they don't have the resources or the technology or the advanced weaponry of the monster that they're fighting. And I think
Okay, I have to say, at this point, how much more depraved can you get than being complicit in an ongoing genocide? In earlier years, in other wars, I don't think the United States was complicit or part of a genocide. There were some pretty serious wars and we were killing quite a lot of people. But the evidence is there that what the Israelis have been doing and what they're trying to do is a historical case of ethnic cleansing, and genocide. And we refuse to stop actually giving them arms. We talk about the right of Israel to defend itself, when what we're really talking about is the right of Israel but to kill Palestinians who are being occupied by the Israelis. According to international law, the Israelis have no right to defend themselves. The Palestinians have the right to resist. That is the truth of the matter. But I think you can hardly get any more depraved than the foreign policy of the United States is right now.
I think that's important to keep in mind in terms of resistance, because resistance loses sometimes, a lot of times actually. And, there's some people who I think maybe only want to support it when it's winning. I don't know. But all that's to say, I guess my question here is to the U.S. question. You and I have often talked about the U.S. the threat to the U.S. in the region if they allow this to explode into a regional war. We're closer to that possibility now than we were 2 weeks ago, right? And that's all to say, do you think the U.S. is making a miscalculation here? Because it seems like something in the U.S. has shifted in terms of those in power, where they went from trying to constrain Israel on the issue of Lebanon to avoid this all-out regional war to kind of just greenlighting whatever Israel does. I'm not sure what's changed, but is that a miscalculation on their part? Does the reality of U.S. as sitting ducks across the region remain if they continue to allow this to expand?
For many years, I used to think that the American administration is intelligence and they plan for 5, 10, and 20 years ahead. But then when I saw how they occupy Afghanistan and how they occupy Iraq, I understood the level of stupidity of the decision makers in the US. There are many thinkers in the US who are extremely intelligent, but they do not have influence over the decision makers. They can be the most brilliant people on earth, and if their voice is not heard, it means they have no influence, and the US administration will continue doing the same thing. So if we see the Americans were very powerful, in 1982, they landed in Lebanon, and they were kicked out. They've landed in Iraq was completely dismantled, and they were kicked out. So the Americans, at the end of the day, they have the most powerful machine, but they cannot stay in a country. They can win the country, but they can't stay. They can go to war, but they can't make peace. And after war, what's going to happen? How are they going to build? They build nothing wherever they went. They destroyed Afghanistan. They've destroyed Iraq. They've destroyed Syria. They've destroyed Libya. Wherever they went, they did not create a base where people will like them to stay or will like their influence. They're afraid of them. But this fear can go. So what's happening today is completely different. We cannot talk about an all-out war for the simple reason. The Iranians control the Strait of Hormuz. Ansarullah control the Red Sea. Hezbollah can control with the surface-to-surface missile the Mediterranean. What's going to happen to the world economy is going to be completely destroyed. Can the Americans prevent that from happening? Of course.
That is a wonderful point. So much of the world economy centers around the shipment of oil coming from the Middle East and going to other places. And we all still rely so much on the oil, so much on the fossil fuels, but so much on the gas that comes from this region and through the shipping lanes, of this region. We can't afford to shut down this region. We can't have an all-out war in this region. And yet what Israel is trying to do is to get us involved in an all-out war in this region, because the right-wing Israelis running that country right now believe in some biblical nonsense, biblical myths.
Of course not. They could not prevent, with the strongest navy in the world, along with the British one, the Ansarullah to open the Red Sea for the navigation they want.
The Ansarullah, of course, are the Houthis, also known as the Houthis.
So what's going to happen in other places? And also, an all-out war means what? We've seen Donald Trump, what he did when he killed the Brigadier General Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian Brigadier General, and the Iraqi commander Abu Mahdi Mohandes. He received 16 missiles next day and did nothing, did not react. And McKinsey, the chief of staff, said,
So that's another important point. The very next day, the Iranians sent 16 missiles to American bases around the area. When I say the area, I mean the area of West Asia with all those American bases in it. Even though Trump ordered the assassination and successfully completed that assassination, he did not retaliate against the attack of 16 missiles on American bases, because he knew that if he did, there might be rocket attacks against all of the American bases in West Asia. And his military people told him we were not in a position to defend against that.
Iran could have inflicted on us between 100 and 150 soldiers killed in that very precise bombing. That was a message for the future for the US to be engaged in any war against Iran. Yes, the US can destroy Iran, but can prevent Iran from retaliating? No. Hezbollah can have many of its warehouses destroyed. Can Israel stop Hezbollah from retaliating? No. Can the Americans stop the Iraqis from bombing their military bases? Of course not. They're sitting duck in Ain al-Assad, in Taji, next to the airport in Iraq. They can't do that. You can kill many people, but you can't deter them and stop them from attacking, because these people have an ideology and they're fighting out of an ideology. And this is why they cannot be defeated. All the Israeli official and military commander told Netanyahu, Hamas is an idea. You cannot defeat it. In the past, we know also that Al-Qaeda is an idea, cannot be defeated. So all these ideology cannot be defeated. They will always continue existing in one way or another. So I am not worried about an all-out war in the Middle East because nobody wants it and it's not going to happen. As long as Hezbollah is fighting, Hamas did not surrender. Netanyahu went from Gaza to the West Bank, from the West Bank to Lebanon. He's looking for a victory. Is this going to be his victory or his graveyard? I think it's going to be his graveyard.
So that's it. A terrific interview, many terrific points, okay, that are made. This interview was done before the Iranians attacked Israel directly themselves. And we will be getting to that, okay, in just a while. But for right now, I want to go back to your comments to see if there are any more. Nope, it doesn't look like there are any more comments, so I will continue to go on. My next piece tonight is, I have a lot of things. This is going to be a long show. A long show. Here is a piece by Jeffrey Sachs, the wonderful Jeffrey Sachs. It appeared in Common Dreams. The name of it is Israel's Ideology of Genocide Must Be Confronted and Stopped. Israel's violent extremists, now in control of its government, believe that Israel has the biblical license, indeed a religious mandate, to destroy the Palestinian people. This was published on September 30th, 2024 in Common Dreams by Jeffrey Sachs, of course. When Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu took the podium at the UN General Assembly last week, dozens of governments walked out of the chamber. The global opprobrium of Netanyahu and his government is due to Israel's depraved violence against its Arab neighbors. And Netanyahu purveys a fundamentalist ideology that has turned Israel into the most violent nation in the world. Israel's fundamentalist credo holds that Palestinians have no right whatsoever to their own nation. The Israeli Knesset recently passed a declaration rejecting a Palestinian state in what the Knesset calls the land of Israel, meaning the land west of the Jordan River. The Knesset of Israel firmly opposes, this is a quote, the establishment of a Palestinian state west of Jordan. The establishment of a Palestinian state in the heart of the land of Israel will pose an existential danger to the state of Israel and its citizens, perpetuate the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and destabilize the region. The call, the land west of the Jordan, the, quote, heart of the land of Israel, unquote, is breathtaking. Israel is one part of the land west of the Jordan, not the entire land. The International Court of Justice has recently ruled that Israel's occupation of the Palestinian lands, those outside of Israel's borders as of June 4th, 1967, for the June 1967 war, is plainly illegal. The UN General Assembly has recently voted overwhelmingly to back the ICJ ruling and called on Israel to withdraw from Palestinian territories within 1 year. It is worth recalling that when the British Empire promised a Jewish homeland in the Ottoman Palestine in 1917, the Palestinian Arabs constituted around 90% of the population. At the time of the 1947 UN partition plan, the Palestinian Arab population was approximately 67% of the population, though the partition plan proposed to give the Arabs only 44% of the land. Now Israel asserts the claim to 100% of the land. Here, I have to say something. It's true that the partition gave the Arabs only 44% of the land, but that part of the land was the fertile part, okay, the land of Israel. Much of the remaining 56% that was given to the Israelis for their state was the Negev Desert. where nobody lives. So if you looked at actually what the partition did in terms of allocating fertile land to each of these groups, I think the Arabs actually had an advantage over the Israelis when it came to the fertile land. Now, I don't mean in this sense to justify anything about what happened later, and especially not the Nakba, which chased 750,000 Arabs out of their homes uh, uh, inside of the Israeli partition. But I'm only pointing out the truth when it comes to the Arab land that was given to each group. There are many sources of this Israeli brazenness, the most important being the backing of Israel by the U.S. military power. Without the U.S. military backing, Israel could not possibly rule over an apartheid regime in which Palestinian Arabs constitute nearly one half of the population, yet hold none of the political power. Future generations will look back in amazement at the success of the Israel lobby uh, um, uh, in manipulating the U.S. military to the severe detriment of U.S. national security and global peace. Yet, in addition to the U.S. military, there is another source of Israel's profound injustice to the Palestinian people. That is the religious fundamentalism pervaded by fanatics such as the self-proclaimed fascist Bezalel Smotrich, Israel's Minister of Finance and Minister of National Defense, Itamar Ben-Gvir. These fanatics hold fast to the biblical book of Joshua, according to which God promised the Israelites the land, quote, from the Negev wilderness in the south to the Lebanon mountains in the north, from the Euphrates River in the east to the Mediterranean Sea in the west. So that's the concept of greater Israel, which drives these fanatics. I mean, it's not even just from the river to the sea. It's from the Negev to the Lebanon mountains. It's from the Euphrates River. That's Iraq to the Mediterranean Sea. In the west, that includes all of Jordan and much of Iraq and some of Egypt. At the UN last week, Netanyahu, as a matter of fact, their whole conception of greater Israel actually goes all the way up to the banks of the Nile River in the east. But that's another story. That goes beyond the book of Joshua. But they dream that too. At the UN last week, Netanyahu once again staked Israel's claim to the land on biblical grounds. Quote, when I spoke last year, I said we face the same timeless choice that Moses put before the people of Israel thousands of years ago as we were about to enter the promised land. Moses told us that our actions would determine whether we bequeath to future generations a blessing or a curse, unquote. What Netanyahu did not tell his fellow leaders, most of whom had in any event vacated the hall, was that Moses laid out a genocidal path to the promised land in Deuteronomy 31. Quote, the Lord will destroy these nations before you, and you shall dispossess them. Joshua is the one who will cross ahead of you. In other words, this is the Lord speaking to Moses. Just as the Lord has spoken, quote, the Lord will do to them just as he did to Sihon and Og, the kings of the Amorites, and to their land when he destroyed them. Quote, the Lord will deliver them up before you, and you shall do to them according to all the commandments which I have commanded you, unquote. Israel's violent extremists believe that Israel has the biblical license, indeed a religious mandate, to destroy the Palestinian people. Their biblical hero is Joshua, the Israelite commander who succeeded Moses and who led the Israelites' genocidal conquests. Netanyahu is also referred to the Amalekites. Okay, another case of a God-ordained genocide of foes of the Israelites in a clear, quote, dog whistle, unquote, to his fundamentalist followers. Here is the biblical account of Joshua's conquest of Hebron in Joshua 10. Then Joshua and all Israel with him went up from Eglon to Hebron, and they fought against it. They captured it and struck it and its king and all its cities and all the persons who were in it with the edge of the sword. He left no survivor according to all that he had done to Eglon, and he utterly destroyed it and every person who was in it. There is a deep irony to this genocidal account. It almost surely is not historically accurate. There is no evidence that the Jewish kingdoms arose from genocides. Most likely they arose from local Canaanite communities adopting early forms of Judaism. Jewish fundamentalists adhered to a 6th century BCE, that's before the Common Era, text that is most likely a mythical reconstruction of purported events several centuries earlier in a form of political bravado that was common in ancient Near Eastern politics. The problem is 21st century Israeli politicians, illegal settlers, and other fundamentalists, such as the evangelical Christians here in the United States, who proposed to live by and kill by 6th century BCE political propaganda. Israel's violent fundamentalists are some 2,600 years out of step with today's acceptable forms of statecraft and international law. Israel is duty-bound to the UN Charter and the Geneva Conventions, not to the Book of Joshua. According to the recent ICJ ruling and UN General Assembly resolution backing it up, Israel must withdraw in the coming 12 months from the occupied Palestinian lands. According to international law, Israel's borders are those of June 4th, 1967, not the Euphrates to the Mediterranean Sea. The ICJ ruling and UN General Assembly vote is not a ruling against the State of Israel per se. It is a ruling only against extremism, indeed against extremism and malevolence on both sides of the divide. There are two peoples, each with roughly half the overall population and with no shortage of internal social, political, and ideological divisions within the two communities. International law calls for two states living side by side in peace. The best solution, which we should strive for and hope for sooner rather than later, is that the two states and the two peoples get along and actually draw strength from each other. Until then, however, the practical solution will be peacekeepers and fortified borders to protect each side from the animosity of the other, but with each having the chance to prosper. The utterly intolerable and illegal situation is the status quo in which Israel rules brutally over the Palestinian people. Hopefully, there will soon be a state of Palestine, sovereign and independent, whether the Knesset wants it or not. This is not Israel's choice, but the mandate of the world community and of international law. The sooner the state of Palestine is welcomed as a member state of the UN with the security of both Israel and Palestine backed by the UN peacekeepers, the sooner will peace come to the region. That from Jeffrey Sachs. There are a lot of people who despaired of the two-state solution. They have done so because the Israeli settlement of the West Bank has been such that that area, which is supposed to be dedicated to Palestinians, is shot through with 750,000 Israelis and hundreds, if not thousands, of Israeli settlements. What Jeffrey Sachs is saying is that those settlements have to be ended. Those Jews have to go back to Israel proper, or have to go back to where they came. The West Bank belongs to the Palestinians, not to the Israelis. Gaza belongs to the Palestinians, not to the Israelis. The Israelis have no right to govern it, no right to blockade it, no right to control it in any way. Gaza and the West Bank both need to be part of a Palestinian state, and the international community should be combined to force that solution on the two sides. So I'm going to stop sharing that and turn again to your comments to see if there are any more. There are no more comments. There are still 75 people here, however. So I guess this stream is holding one's interest. And so I will go forward to the next piece, which is from Mike Whitney. And it addresses the ground offensive. When he wrote it, it was on September 30th. The ground offensive has now started, but what he said was, Israel's ground offensive just hours away. That's the headline on this piece. There's an explosion. I don't know where it was or what caused it. There's no caption on it. Quote, as Israel continues its genocide in Palestine, expands its murderous rampage into Lebanon, the West cheers and arms them. Arab governments sleep, the UN looks the other way, and the world is dragged passively towards World War III. That was from Craig Machyber. He was the former State Department functionary who resigned in protest of the foreign policy of the United States. He's now a human rights attorney, and that is what he said about the world being dragged passively towards World War III. Going on with the article, on Monday, Israeli armored divisions and combat troops gathered on Israel's northern borders, while Israeli artillery units pounded targets across the southern Lebanon. Early reports filed on Twitter, on X, indicate, on Zitter, indicate that Israeli reconnaissance units have already crossed the border into Lebanon, clearing the way for an upcoming ground offensive. According to Reuters, the Lebanese army has already fled its forward positions in the south, leaving Hezbollah with the daunting task of stopping the Israeli advance. A clash between the rival armies could happen as soon as tonight. At this reading of the article, it may already have happened. I didn't see any news of it before I came on, but the clash between the rival armies might already have started. The Biden administration has reportedly deployed a significant number of fighter jets, including squadrons of F-15Es, F-16s, A-10s, and F-22s to assist Israel in its attempt to overpower Hezbollah and cut a path to the Litani River. Biden has also sent, also Biden, by the way, is supposed to have said a few days ago that he wasn't going to assist Israel in any offensive operations. He was only going to help them to defend themselves. So why is he reportedly deploying a significant number of fighter jets to assist Israel in its attempt to overpower Hezbollah and go to the Litani River? That is offense. It is not defense. Biden has also sent thousands of additional troops to the region to, quote, bolster security and defend Israel if necessary. The administration has dropped any pretense that the United States is not directly involved in a conflict that will inevitably engulf the entire region, leading to America's expulsion from the Middle East. The president's decision to provide unconditional support for Israel's apartheid regime has put the U.S. on a suicidal trajectory that will undermine America's global interests while accelerating the emergence of multipolar world order. This is from former UN rights attorney Craig Muckhyber. Or maybe that's what he was, a UN human rights attorney. But I seem to remember that he was part of the State Department. Anyway, the U.S. has created a Frankenstein monster, which, drunk with impunity, is rampaging across the Middle East, leaving mangled bodies and rivers of blood everywhere in its wake. Rather than reining in the beast, they're funding, arming, and insulating it from any accountability by the international legal institutions in the Security Council. How many more innocents must die? Will they drag the whole world into war? The task of stopping the monster and its sponsors now falls on all of us. That was a tweet from Craig Muckhyber. Going on with the article, a number of recent tactical victories, including the assassination of Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah and many of his senior level commanders, has emboldened Israel to engage Hezbollah directly on its native soil. And while the venture involves considerable risks for the invader, Netanyahu and his lieutenants believe that Hezbollah's command and communications have been so severely degraded that there may be an opportunity to deliver a death blow to their longtime enemy. Have to comment here. The evidence thus far is that it was not a death blow. Hezbollah's command and communications was intact enough to deliver a serious attack on Israel today in coordination with the Iranian attack, on Israel. So they had enough command and communications for that, at least. Throughout Monday, Israel pounded targets in southern Beirut with the same bunker-busting bombs that were used to kill Nasrallah. These behemoths generate a massive blast similar to a small nuclear weapon, leveling an entire city block in one blow. Naturally, the airstrikes have spread panic across the capital, Beirut, that is, sending more than 1 million residents fleeing to the north. There have been numerous reports that Israeli bombers have attacked the long lines of vehicles leaving the city, similar to what took place in Gaza just months ago. Not surprisingly, the combination of Nasrallah's assassination and the opening of a new front in the war have sent Netanyahu's personal approval rating skyrocketing. Here's an excerpt from a recent survey. Quote, a poll published on Friday showed the ongoing Israeli offensive on Lebanon, which has killed hundreds this week, has significantly boosted the popularity of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud party, increasing its projected number of seats in the parliament. The survey, conducted by Israeli daily Ma'ariv, highlighted that, quote, on the backdrop of a series of harsh blows dealt to Hezbollah and the escalating fighting in the north, Likud has strengthened this week, unquote. Israeli offensive on Lebanon boosts Netanyahu's Likud party popularity. Poll doesn't give the polling figures. What are we to make of this survey? Should we assume that Israelis admire strong and resolute leaders? They're willing to do whatever it takes to defend Israel's national security, or is this, quote, boost in popularity, unquote, merely the sign of a paranoid, bloodthirsty people driven by hatred and revenge? It is also worth noting that Israel's operational strategy does not align with the Fourth Geneva Convention, the Hague Convention, or international humanitarian law. In fact, Israel's way of waging war ignores all the rules governing humane behavior dating back centuries. All of this is by design. It's all a subset of the prevailing military theory called the Dehia Doctrine. Take a look. Quote, Israel's military strategy since 2008, known as the Dehia Doctrine. Lieutenant General Gadi Eisenkot, former commander of the Israel Defense Forces Northern Front, was the first to mention the Dehia Doctrine following the civilian casualties in Lebanon during the 2006 Israel-Hezbollah war. In a 2008 announcement after the destructive conflict, Eisenkot asserted, quote, what happened in the Dehia quarter of Beirut in 2006 will happen in every village from which Israel is fired on. We will apply disproportionate force on it and cause great damage and destruction there. From our standpoint, these are not civilian villages, they are military bases. This is not a recommendation, this is a plan, and it has been approved, unquote. This was from Ynet News. The quote continues, Israel national security expert Gabriel Saboni explained in 2008 that the Dehia Doctrine aims to deter future attacks by inflicting damage extensive enough to prolong reconstruction and require significant financial investment. Similarly, former Israel National Security Advisor Yaakov Amidror stated in 2008 that Israel's retaliation will be intentionally disproportionate. Okay, the Dehia Doctrine indicates that the Israel Defense Forces military responses should target not only its enemy military capacities, but the infrastructure and economy that supports its opponent. This aspect of the Dehia Doctrine is framed as future deterrence through depleting enemy resources. The 2009 United Nations Fact-Finding Commission on the Gaza conflict acknowledged the Dehia Doctrine as an Israeli armed forces strategy that involves mass destruction of civilian populations and infrastructure. Credible observers from The Guardian and The Washington Post argue that the current onslaught devastating Gaza is a continuation of the doctrine. The Guardian and The Washington Post. Israel's Dehia Doctrine intentionally violates international humanitarian law. That was from Global Health Justice. In short, we can expect Israel to implement the same, quote, strategy of annihilation in Lebanon that they used in Gaza. The IDF will target food and water sources, power plants, oil storage tanks, gas pipelines, and all the other vital infrastructure that are needed to sustain human life. They will turn the southern parts of the country into a wasteland consistent with the Dehia Doctrine. One pundit promised to, quote, bomb Lebanon back to the Stone Age, unquote, which appears to be a fairly accurate summary of the overall strategy. This is from a post by political analyst Arnaud Bertrand, French political analyst. The quote, the principles Israel breaks were established for centuries, such as the illegality of bombing embassies or the killing of medical staff. People don't realize just how consequential this is. What's at stake is quite simply everything. If we let the future of the international order be based on the murder of Palestinians and now the Lebanese, we're paving the way for the most unprincipled and nihilistic order we've ever known. where virtually anything goes. Israel is literally destroying everything civilization is based upon: sovereignty, the rule of law, human rights, freedom, etc. If you care about any of these things, the Palestinian cause should be the priority cause for you. That's from Arno Bertrand. Well said, for what it's worth. You can't pray for both sides while arming one, says the sign. Note the AFP, I'm not sure what that is, the Armed Forces of Palestine, I don't know, quoting a State Department official, confirms, oh, perhaps that's the AP, not the AFP. Quoting a State Department official, confirms that Israeli ground operations inside Lebanon are now underway. Yes, they were underway. So that's that one. Pretty dooming, pretty depressing, pretty barbaric, likely Israeli plans for Lebanon. They must be stopped. Still 75 people watching, but no further comments. I shall continue. The next piece I wanted to cover tonight is a video from the most excellent Scott Ritter. This is from George Napolitano's The Judging Freedom. It was a special broadcast, one scheduled in just a hurry, due to the Iranian attack on Israel. And it's an analysis of what we know about, the Iranian attack up to the point of the program that Scott, and Judge Napolitano gave this evening at 6 p.m. So here it is. I'm going to go through it. I will skip the ad.
Today, long day, October 1st, 2024. Scott Ritter joins us now. Scott, I very much appreciate you coming on the last minute. It's been a long day for both of us and for all the folks watching us. What do we know about the Iranian missile attack today on Israel? What did it consist of? What was...
Oh no, we're embarrassed. We screwed up. Our warehouse is overloaded with survival food kits, but our mess is your...
Sorry,
struck down, what got through, what damage, if any, did it do?
Well, I can't say we know anything other than the Iranians fired a significant number of missiles, the majority of which appeared to strike the ground. Whether or not they struck the ground where they intended to strike is unknowable until the Iranians tell us what their objectives were and what their battle damage assessment. I would imagine that if these missiles did strike their intended targets, Israel will not be quick to confirm that, because the last thing you want to do when you're on the receiving end of missiles is confirm the accuracy of the missiles. Iran doesn't have a sophisticated, space-based reconnaissance capability to take immediate battle damage assessment. So even the Iranians will be, guessing to some extent. It appears, however, that a significant number of missiles were targeted at Nevatim Air Base outside of Beersheba. This is one of Israel's most important air bases. It's where the F-35 fighters are based out of, along with Netanyahu's Air Force One and some other, critical air assets. The videotape of this attack shows what appear to be hypersonic missiles, coming in and in significant quantity, and hitting what they're, hitting something on the ground. They Some of them may have been intercepted, but not all of them. This appears to be part of the Iranian strategy of saturation attacks. If you take a look at the quantity of the missiles being fired, it simply overwhelmed Israel's air defense systems. The Iranians also appear to have made use of the more sophisticated missiles, the hypersonic Fatah 2. They fired to take out the Arrow 2 and Arrow 3 surface-to-air missile or anti-missile defense shields. I've been looking at some videos that look as though the Iranians were deploying sophisticated warheads that have multiple warheads and decoys and accelerating warheads. So they used a variety of means. Back in April when we talked about this, I said, look, the Iranians led off with old stuff. It was just basically to exhaust the Israelis, exhaust the air defense, and then they finished with a dozen or so of the good stuff, and all of those hit their target. And at the time, I said this was Iran putting a marker on the table, saying the next time you're just going to get the good stuff. Well, this was the next time Israel got the good stuff, and what we saw here is that Israel is defenseless, utterly. You may shoot down 10% of the incoming missiles, but the bottom line is Iran saturated Israel's missile defense shield, and it wasn't just Israel's. Israel had the assistance of the United States Navy, and American THAAD systems. The Jordanians were actively involved, bragging about how they shot down one or two missiles. So you basically had the world's densest, most sophisticated ballistic missile shield being exposed as utterly useless. And this is a signal in and of itself to the Israelis, because they are talking about retaliation. And if Israel retaliates in a significant way, Iran has already reloaded all 180 plus launchers that were involved in the first one. They have others in reserve, remember.
So that's a key point. Iran has already reloaded. Also, they shot evidently 180 missiles this time. That wasn't as many as they fired before. But this was the good stuff, so more of the stuff actually got through than before. But last time they fired 350 flying objects at Israel of a number of different kinds. There was some information that indicated that the the attack on the airbase resulted in the destruction of 22 of the F-35s. I haven't been able to confirm that, but if true, that is very interesting.
Right now, Iran is also holding a loaded pistol against the head of the United States, letting the United States know that if they get involved in any offensive action against Israel, Al-Udeid Air Base in Qatar will be destroyed just like Nevatim was. There's no defense against it. Al-Assad Air Base in Iraq will be destroyed just like Nevatim was. There's no defense against it. And Iran may strike, the American naval base in Bahrain, the home of the Fifth Fleet. This was a tremendous display of capability by Iran, one that Israel and the United States would do well to reflect on before undertaking any precipitous moves.
Are the hypersonic missiles the ones that are impossible to stop?
Well, I wouldn't say impossible, because technology being what it is, you always might be able to find a solution. I would imagine that if you fired one hypersonic against a defensive capability that was ready to receive it, you might get lucky. But generally speaking, the hypersonics are coming in at a rate of engagement, a rate of closure that's too fast for any radar system today to configure an intercept solution and have the interceptor actually be able to do it. I think what we saw was there were some occasions of the Israelis playing catch up, meaning that they were trying to catch up to the warhead, but they couldn't. It was going too fast. And it appears that the hypersonics that Iran fired just came through. The Israeli air sirens didn't even go off, so they didn't even detect it. That's how fast they were going. That's how quick their closure speed was.
Do not take apple cider vinegar before you see this. Vinegar works to help you slim down in 3
Do the Israelis have hypersonics?
No, again, the Israelis have the Jericho 2 and the Jericho 3 missile. These are nuclear capable, but they can fire a conventional payload. And the Jericho 3 is believed to have something that that will have closure speeds similar to a hypersonic missile, but it's a ballistic missile, which means that its speed is generated by a ballistic trajectory. A hypersonic is a missile that comes in on a non-ballistic trajectory and usually under its own power, and hits the ground at significant speeds that aren't generated by a ballistic trajectory.
Is the Israeli Iron Dome, about which they've been boasting for generations, effectively useless?
Well, the Iron Dome wasn't meant to defend against these systems. The Iron Dome was meant to defend against a saturation attack by Katyushka rockets or low technology short range rockets. It wasn't designed to defend against the saturation attack of ballistic missiles or ballistic missiles. This is what the Arrow 2, the Arrow 3, the Patriot, the FAD system, these are the systems that are designed to defend against those. The Iron Dome is when Hamas fires off, 70, unguided rockets that go against an area. The Iron Dome is designed to shoot those down, or if Hezbollah fires Katyushka rockets. But the Iron Dome isn't designed to take down ballistic missiles. There's other systems that are supposed to do that, and clearly those systems didn't work.
Does Israel have missiles that can reach Iran?
100%. The Jericho 2, the Jericho 3 have the ability to reach Iran. But the difference is Israel's missiles aren't designed. They're not designed to do the kind of saturation attack that Iran just carried out. These are missiles that are one shot, one hit, potentially with nuclear capability. But if they're conventional, it's just designed to have one warhead come in. The question is, could the Russian S-400 air defense systems that Russia has supposedly provided Iran and are in position around Iran's critical infrastructure, can they get an intercept solution on a Jericho ballistic missile? And I think the answer might be yes. So even if Israel were to fire Jericho missiles, there's a good chance that because they're flying a conventional ballistic trajectory, that they could be shot down by the S-400.
What is Russia's role, as you understand it, in the defense of Iran, other than providing the defensive mechanisms that you just talked about? For example, would President Putin...
Okay, that's all I'm going to do of this one. What I want to comment on is that this attack by Iran used the hypersonic missiles. As far as we know, all the hypersonic missiles got through. Not one of them was shot down. I've read or heard it said that there were at least 12 of the hypersonic missiles that were used. They weren't the only missiles to get through. The Iron Dome was overloaded, and so lots more missiles got through. People are saying that maybe 70% of the missiles got through this time. So it really was quite an accomplishment. We don't know the extent of the damage. We know that once again, Iran refrained from attacking civilian areas. They were attacking infrastructure. Okay, they were attacking military bases, but they refrained from attacking civilians directly. Okay, thus far. So they're still holding back. Also, the hypersonic missiles they used, the Fatah 2, are evidently not the most advanced of the hypersonic missiles that they have. They have more advanced missiles still to use. They haven't used all their capability. So they're still holding back. Why would they hold back? Because they're not looking for an all-out war, which would involve the United States. They're looking to give the Israelis, a warning, a more serious warning than last time. Specifically, you are naked before us. You cannot stop our hypersonic missiles. And once we overload the Iron Dome, you can't even stop, our regular missiles. We used only 180 missiles here. We have the capability to use thousands of missiles in a coordinated attack. We can send missiles for hours on end, and we can destroy much of your country. If you retaliate, do not retaliate. If you retaliate, it will go much harder with you. People have been asking the questions, well, how can it go harder? It can go harder if civilian areas are attacked, but full on. One thing Iran announced is that they had sent some of their missiles to the heart of the occupied territories. Now, what exactly are the heart of the occupied territories? I assume they did not aim the missiles at the Palestinian cities, at the Palestinian areas. They must have aimed those missiles at the Israeli settlements, because those are at the heart of the occupied areas. So that's where their missiles must have gone. But there weren't that many missiles in this attack that went there. But they were demonstrating a capability to attack the settlers. That is very important, because what the Iranians may be planning to do if the Israelis retaliate is to send many, many, many more missiles at the settlers. I have often said on here that if they do that and they drive the settlers out, they will be shifting the political balance of power inside of Israel away from the Netanyahu regime. And that then might finally result in a ceasefire and negotiated peace, and might create the basis for a two-state solution, which does not exist right now. So with that, I'm going to leave the Scott Ritter, Judge Napolitano video and go to our final piece of the evening. It has been a long night, but there are still 75 of you here, so I am happy about that, and will continue streaming for the sake of the 75 of you who remain. The next piece is a video of Judge Napolitano with one Pepe Escobar, also talking a great deal about the attack by Iran on Israel, but also talking about the larger geopolitical picture, which makes this very significant. So I will play a part of this video before I check your comments again and say good night. So we are buffering for a change.
From midnight in Moscow, as I've been promising everyone all day, is my dear friend, a brilliant, courageous journalist, and a wonderful human being, Pepe Escobar. Pepe, welcome here, and thank you for joining us at this time of day in your world. I have a lot of questions here to ask you about the reaction in the axis of resistance to the murder of Hassan Nasrallah, but we know what the Iranian reaction has been, at least the first part of it. So let's start with that. The latest reports are that Iran fired between 180 and 200 missiles at military and intelligence targets, not at civilians, in Tel Aviv, and that about a dozen or so of these missiles got through. There's also a lot of debris in Tel Aviv due to the clash between the Israeli and American defensive missiles and the Iranian offensive ones. Obviously, they crash in midair and debris falls. There are no reports of Israeli casualties. How do you read the significance or lack of significance in the Iranian missile assault tonight?
Well, I would like to start, Chuck, with a very important information that we confirmed maybe an hour and a half ago.
Please.
It's from one of our sources in Iranian intel. Some of us foreigners met this source in our previous visits to Tehran. He is trustworthy. He's not corrupt. Yes, there is corruption inside the IRGC. Yes, there are generals who are bought with some nights are full of cash. It's true, but there are people who are very, very serious. And what he told us confirmed something that many of us have been discussing since the murder of Nasrallah this past weekend. Because President Pezeshkian, it's so naive that it, it beggars belief. He went public, basically saying that, well, we trusted the Americans. They promised us that there will be a ceasefire in Gaza if we didn't retaliate against the murder of Haniyeh in Tehran. How can a president of Iran trust the Americans? This is absolutely impossible. And this generated a groundswell of rejection among Iranian public opinion and especially among the IRGC. So what happened before the missile attack today? There was practically a frontal clash between Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei and Pezeshkian.
When you say a front,
Okay, I'm going to stop that for a moment and see what I can do about stopping the buffering. Maybe if all I need to do is refresh the page. So remember when Elijah Magnier said, why should the Iranians get involved when they have the possibility of continuing to rely on Hezbollah and continuing to rely on their proxies? We know they don't want to risk a confrontation with the United States. They don't want a wider war. But as Pepe said, it turned out, in this case, that they took very little time to retaliate because it seemed, to Khamenei, that they were being much too soft in their approach to the West and that they were made fools of because they were trusting the West over the ceasefire, and the West just lied, to Pezeshkian. So that is the kind of thing that can get the Iranians to drop their caution and to come forward with a retaliation that's quick. But notice they're still managing the escalation because they weren't hitting at civilian targets. Next time, look for them to hit at civilian targets, but also look for them to still hold back. Next time they retaliate, if the Israelis go forward with something else and they retaliate, next time look for a lot more missiles and look for more of their extremely high quality hypersonic missiles. Look for more hypersonic missiles too. But look for a much stronger attack, and look for the attack to finally be directed at the civilian areas. In particular, look for them to be directed at the settlements, in the West Bank. The MOD is the Ministry of Defense, the Russian Ministry of Defense, and the IRG is the Iranian Revolution Guard Corps. Okay, so a bit of new information. Scott told us also something about that, and we got the impression that it was a pretty good hit. But Pepe is saying completely devastated is the right way to describe it. So that air base is going to be out of commission for a while. A big thing, the Iranians did, because that was the air base that was used by the Israelis to create the extreme devastation in Lebanon and in other recent places where they've created, extreme devastation. Oh, so that was new information, that there were 400 missiles that were sent out. I think the Iranians are capable of sending out 10 times that number, maybe 100 times that number. They can devastate the whole of Israel. I don't know how many hypersonic missiles they have, though. But of course, once they overwhelm the Iron Dome and hit Iron Dome installations with the hypersonic missiles, And the rest of Israel is naked to all of the other missiles. If you lead with the hypersonics and you knock out, all the defenses, then all the other missiles can't be defended against. They just hit. It was a really excellent question. It's a key question. In other words, did the assassination of Nasrallah actually strengthen Hezbollah, or did it weaken Hezbollah? Great question. Okay, so I got that wrong. He says this time they got 70% of the missiles that was sent. 30% actually got through. Last time it was 90% of the missiles, and 10% got through. So I think it's really amazing the amount of information Pepe gets through his sources. In other words, I don't think you could get the answers he gave uh, to the questions from anybody else except Pepe. No other journalist would come even close. So I'm going to stop it at this point. And I'm going to end things. First, I want to see if there are any comments. Oh, somehow what I was listening to was not getting through. I'm sorry to hear that. I don't know why it wasn't getting through. It was the earlier video was getting through, right? But I guess the last video was not getting through. I don't know why that was true. Okay, so I guess I'm going to wind it up here. I still have 78 people who are listening, and that is very good. But I don't think I'm going to continue it, okay, any further. I'm going to wind it up by saying, oh, look, I spelled assassination wrong in the total. Well, I forgot one S. Okay. So, okay, what I want to say is the Israelis have been pushing continuously for a wider war. They're trying to drag the United States into the war. That's what their efforts have been dedicated to for quite a long time now. They reject any idea of a ceasefire. They have been the barrier to ceasefire, okay, in Gaza. They decide to go into Lebanon. The United States doesn't want them to go into Lebanon because it fears, okay, a wider war. They start this assassination killing spree. And some people in the United States seem to like that, like perhaps Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan. Lloyd Austin thinks it's very dangerous and is wanting the administration not to take undue risks. Now, we know that Lloyd Austin just torpedoed the idea of the administration signing off on the longer range missiles for attacks into Russia. Why did he do that? Because he thought that to allow that would create too much risk of a nuclear war. Okay, well, it doesn't seem like the immediate risk of a nuclear war is as great inside the Middle East. But Lloyd Austin probably knows very well, as the Secretary of Defense, that in the Middle East we are in a weak position. We cannot really defend all of the exposed bases of the U.S. in Western Asia. All of those are open to attack by Iran. Furthermore, if there's a wider war in West Asia, this threatens the economy of the whole world because the flow of oil could stop. So we're looking at that. We really can't afford to have a wider war. Thirdly, while during the 90s we were in a position to do a shock and awe campaign against Iraq and work our will inside of Iraq at that time, since then our military forces have deteriorated considerably. We now have an army that only has 400,000 people in it, and the 400,000 people are spread all over the world. We cannot mount a major invasion, of Iran. We can bomb a lot. We can certainly bomb a lot. But the Iranians are going to have good air defense because they're being supplied with the S-400 systems from Russia. And those are very good. And the Iranians also have their missiles to help to defend them. And it's going to be hard for the United States to attack Iran and to win a war against Iran, especially since we can expect Iran to be aided by the Russians as well, because the Russians are about to conclude a military strategic partnership, with Iran. It won't be an alliance. It's not as tight, as an alliance, but there's every prospect that the Russians will supply all kinds of war material to the Iranians if there's a fight with us. Why would they want to do that? Well, just as we were trying to weaken them inside of Ukraine, they also have an interest in weakening us. And they can do that if we get into a war with Iran. And of course, they also want to save Iran. So we are in a weak position inside of West Asia. We can't really defend the assets we have in West Asia. We are overexposed. More than that, our carriers, our Navy, those ships are vulnerable to Iranian missiles, Hezbollah missiles, and Houthi missiles. What will happen in the country? What will happen here in the United States? If one of our aircraft carriers gets sunk and 5,000 Americans die, what's going to happen then? Our politicians are going to go crazy. They're going to go crazy wanting to attack Iran. And they're going to want to try to use probably nuclear missiles, in order to attack Iran. But we don't have any defense against the Iranian hypersonic missiles. all the Iranians need are nuclear warheads on those missiles, and we are extremely vulnerable. Now, we don't have they don't have ICBMs because they've never needed ICBMs before. But I'm sure the Russians and North Koreans would be pleased to sell them a sufficient number of ICBMs to serve as a deterrent against us. And they'd probably also be able to supply the warheads that would be necessary. And the ICBMs, of course, can be made hypersonic as well. So we really have to say no to a war with Iran. We're trying to walk this fine line. We're trying to say we'll defend Israel, but we won't help them with offense. But here we are helping them with their attack on Lebanon and their attempts to conquer that part of Lebanon south of the Litani River. That looks like it's offense to me. It doesn't look like it's defense. There's a war inside of the administration between the forces that never met a war they didn't like and other military types who assess the military power balance and know that we shouldn't be in a war with Iran. They know that, and they advise against it. But, of course, there are other people around Joe Biden who are saying, oh, no, we can do it. We're still powerful enough to do it. We've got to do it because we've got to defend Israel. But this is not about actually defending Israel. This is about stopping Israel from committing genocide in Gaza and stopping Israel from expanding Israel into greater Israel. We can do that. But in order to do that, what we have to do is to prevent further shipment of arms into Israel. We have to cut off the arms. And we have to tell the Israelis they have to negotiate a peace, that they have to negotiate a two-state solution, whatever that is going to take. And I'm going to leave you with that particular thought. The administration is trying its best to avoid doing that before the election. They're trying to avoid creating a major change in the situation before the election. But I think Israel is going to keep on pushing, and that's going to cause the Iranians to escalate and Hezbollah to escalate and the Houthis to escalate. And there'll be more and more hypersonic missiles attacking Israel. And then Israel will say to us, well, we have to defend ourselves. Didn't you promise to help us to defend ourselves? And we have to respond by saying, we are helping you to defend yourselves. We're cutting off your arms and forcing us to the table so you can stop the genocide and you can stop the attacks, on Lebanon. And that is the best way to defend yourself. So that's where we are at this point. And on that note, I think I'm going to say goodnight. I've been on for 3 hours. It's one of my legendary long shows, but I just had a lot to say tonight and a lot to go through tonight. Hi, Steve. I'm glad to see you. How long did the debate last? Didn't last till now, did it? Well, I did pretty well tonight in spite of the debate. I had 80 people here. I have 80 people here right now. So I guess there were people who would rather watch this than watch the debate. And that was just fine with me. Anyway, I'm going to end the stream now. So good night, everybody. I'll be back on Thursday unless things get hot in international relations over the next day. In that case, I may come back tomorrow with another international relations show. But for the time being, I am done. Dee says good show. Thank you, Dee. And thank you for being around here for the whole of it. That was very nice. I will see you all later. I'll surely see you on Thursday. I don't know if that will be an IR show or a domestic show. It probably depends on how important this debate was between Waltz and Vance. If one side clearly won, I probably won't be back to discuss it. But we'll do something else on Thursday. So good night, everybody.